listening to The Photography Pod, a show for both working professionals and enthusiast photographers alike. And here's your hosts, Steve Vaughan and Nick Church.
Hello again and welcome to The Photography Pod, a photography podcast for both working professionals and enthusiast photographers alike. My name is Steve Vaughan. I'm a wedding photographer here in Oxfordshire, and I've got my good mate and great wedding photographer down in Bristol, Nick Church, with me once again. Nick, how you doing?
Very well, Steve. Good to see you again.
And you, mate. Yeah,
it's a late one today. Is it because our guest has pushed our limits of how late we want to go, and so I've got a cup of coffee and it's going to be fine. Absolutely fine. Nothing can go wrong.
I've got a can of beer. Actually, it looks like a sample, doesn't it? To be honest, looking at that, it is actually a beer. Yeah, it's Marks and Spencer Citra. Yeah,
that's quite a big. That's quite a big sample. I don't think you've ever given a sample to the doctors. They don't expect that much.
That's normally. After I've had 5 pints of it, probably. Anyway, let's not go there. Let's not disappear down a rabbit hole before we even get into 2 minutes of the podcast. So Nick, I know you're always super busy. What have you been up to since we last did a show?
Yeah, really busy as normal, but it's kind of made me think that I think loads of people are. So whenever I do weddings this time of year, or sort of from sort of September onwards, whenever you speak to other photographers or filmmakers, we're all in the same boat that you're just crushed with work at this time of year. And what you'd like to do is say to all of your clients, there's going to be a 6-month delivery time, and then you can just use that sort of fallow period of just for editing and stuff and just really smooth out the humps. But you can't do that, so you're crushing with loads of stuff. And it just makes me think that it's almost like as sole traders as well, as in, individual sort of creatives, it's almost like our measure of success. We almost kind of welcome it. It's like take on more and more work is our metric, our barometer of how successful we're being. And actually, that success is a fairly like small axis really of what's because it's at the expense of your hobbies and fitness and eating healthily and family time and all the other things and it's funny. Steve, do you ever like say no to work when you're See, I never do. And this is the problem.
One of the most important things you do in business, and as you know, I've got 2 businesses. I've got my wedding photography business, and we've also got the training business that I'm going to major on as I move forward. I think it's really important knowing how to say no, because if you say yes to something that isn't right, you're only going to regret it further down the line, and probably your heart's not going to be in it as well. And
I
probably
think
the work you deliver won't be as good. Yeah,
that's certainly one thing about it is a particular job. Going to be, is that going to be a right fit for you? But there's the other thing about how many times are you saying yes to, let's say if you're doing, if you're doing really well, you're getting a large stream of perfect clients. Do it at any point you say, right, actually that's enough now. I need to sort of,
I think anybody that runs their own business or a small company is always frightened to death of having no business, and understandably, and there's always the temptation just to be super busy because that feels like what you should be really. But let's be honest, most of us started working in these kind of industries, and me particularly, because we left the corporate world. You left the IT world. I left the big business world of instrumentation or sales because I had no work-life balance. I was never at home, or when I was at home, I was always working. So the reason that I've done what I've done for the last 10 years is I wanted to get that work-life balance back. And I think the temptation is that we get super busy for that reason, because we feel like we should be really. And I think, without getting too much into sales speak, it's what they call qualification. It's knowing the jobs to take on, whether they're the right kind of customer. Obviously, the budget's got to be right, what they want to do, but also it's got to be right for you. The return for you has to be right as well. So,
I
mean, very deep and philosophical for 2 minutes in.
I've been thinking about it because I'm doing I said to you before, I'm doing my wedding photography workshop in 2 weeks. 14th, 15th of December. And a lot of that is about outsourcing things and working out, because it's the problem that we all have is quite similar to somebody that's starting out as a professional photographer, that they've often got a full-time job or something else that's taking all of their time, childcare, whatever it might be. And it's the same problem, that you just don't have that time. So the idea of outsource, do what you do best, outsource the rest, and that's the idea. And I do find things like after shoot and other things that kind of make us bring more things back into our, circle of things that we're in control of. is a bit of a bad thing in some ways. It's good because it's a lot faster than editing your own images, but it's not as quick and as reliable as an outsourced, but it's cheaper.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So it's an interesting kind of angle. But anyway, that's where I'm at the moment. I've also, as I said, I'm doing a music project at the moment as well. So that's taking a chunk of time. So that is completely a selfish thing of my own.
This is you writing your own songs, playing guitar, singing.
Yeah. So that's going really well, but that's my own fault. That's something that I've decided to do.
So while we're talking about music, let me tell you what I got up to last weekend. So I went to Planet Rockstock. So what's Planet Rockstock? So Planet Rock is an internet radio station that plays rock music, mostly classic rock, but some new bands. And every year they do a festival, hence the stock bit. And it's at Treco Bay in Porthcawl, which is a giant holiday park. So I went with an old university mate of mine I've known for 40 years. That's show my age. And we shared a caravan together. It's not a room, but a caravan. And we had the whole weekend from Thursday till Sunday night walking around a caravan park listening to bands, and it was bloody great.
Oh, amazing.
It was such fun. So the main stage is actually a proper stage. The headliners were Uriah Heep. You're too young. My guest who we're going to introduce in a second is definitely too young. But there was some bands, I'm into sort of Southern rock and all that kind of stuff. There was a couple of great bands, Robert John and the Wreck, the Commoners, bands like that. But also there's a marquee at the side, and you could just walk in. There'd be like young bands just played. And you walk in, you think, actually, these are quite good. I might stop and have another beer, And the best part of it, Nick, was I actually felt young there. There aren't many rock festivals where you have parking for mobility scooters, but this is what it definitely does. So,
because most festivals, if you or I were to go to it, just look like we've come to pick up the kids.
Yeah,
and we've got lost somehow. Yeah, and we need some help.
No, I definitely felt like I belong there. So if you fancy it next year, mate, we can go. Yeah,
that sounds good. Well, you terrified me because when you said it was a campsite or I imagined you were camping, and then I looked at the weather last weekend. Yeah,
no, in a caravan. Yeah, definitely a caravan. So
okay.
Anyway, we're whittering on, and as always, we do have a poor guest who's sitting here thinking, "What the hell has he joined here?" So let me introduce a fantastic videographer, great bloke, and also mad keen Aston Villa supporter, which we will come back to, Roo Stain. Roo, how you doing?
I'm very well, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Great to have you here. You're our first videographer.
Am I?
You are.
What a pleasure.
It's great to have you here. So for those of you, and we will obviously do more info in the show notes, but Roo is a videographer based in Warwickshire. He's also a YouTuber and a podcaster as well. So he probably knows more about what he's doing here than we do, but still. So we'll explore that over the course of our chat together. But I'm going to take a little bit of back seat on this one, because although I've chatted with Roo often, I've never actually met you in the face, and I still haven't because we're doing this over Riverside. But Nick, you and Roo have worked together in a real life wedding. We did once,
didn't we? About 2 or 3 years ago, and I was trying to think earlier of the name of the couple, but it was
Alicia and Jamie.
Oh, well done. Yeah. So I just couldn't. It's funny when you can't search something when you just need the names to search it, and that's the thing I couldn't find. But it's in the most random place. It was a beautiful location, wasn't it? Was it Frome? Is it Wiltshire somewhere?
It was, I think. Yeah, and it's the one wedding I've shot where the view from being stood was actually better than my drone, because we were up quite high, weren't we, on a hill. Yeah. Overlooking this great landscape. I took my drone up and it actually looked worse.
No, it was epic. It was really, really lovely. But that was really nice. It was great to work with Roo. As Steve said, really nice guy. And just, I never work with anyone that's really hard work to get on with, but sometimes you work with people that you just think, well, what a pleasure to be, part of the same job. And that was definitely the case here. So.
Oh, thank you.
And there was a good band as well, wasn't there? Do you remember? There was like a cover, like a Guns N' Roses. They were doing all kinds of covers, but really, really good covers. Really,
Guys, I can't remember what I was doing 3 months ago, let alone 3 years ago.
I couldn't remember the couple's name, though, to be fair.
Yeah, but I can remember the band. To be fair to you, it was in that whole post-COVID hustle, though, wasn't it? It was one of those weddings where it was just like a season of chaos.
Yeah, and the actual venue was a marquee on top of this beautiful hill with a great view, but I seem to remember it was their family's land, and it was but it was in the middle of nowhere, and we basically had a Google pin to get there. And I was about sort of 20 minutes after the ceremony. I was about 20 minutes late because I just could not find it. I think Roo was there. And I think, oh, bugger, he's got there early. But then he said he only got there about 3 minutes before me. So we were both in the same boat. So, Roo, do you want to give us a bit of a background of your journey into sort of how you've got to where you are now?
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I did start off as a wedding photographer originally. And but my background, my degree is in filmmaking. I did film production at university. So even as a photographer, I always had my eye on videography to a certain extent. But when I first started out doing photography, there wasn't much in terms of videography out there. And the videographers I was working with all had such insane amounts of gear and equipment, and it really just felt like something I didn't really want to be involved in. It felt like too much faff. But I would find myself with every videographer I did work with kind of quizzing them because I was just intrigued by it, the whole process. And I feel even my photography style was very filmic in a way, in terms of I used to deliver a slideshow to my couples as well as the full gallery, but I was always shooting with that slideshow in mind. Like, so I wanted like an establishing shot. I then wanted like wide shots, mid shots. So very kind of videography style in a way. So when it came to moving over to video, it's almost like I'd been practicing as a videographer, even with my photography to a certain extent. But there was one year in particular where I found that I had more videographers working with me in that one season than I had my entire 3 or 4 years up to that point. So I could see a shift in the market. So I was thinking, if I'm going to make this move into video, now is the time, because I felt like the photography market was just getting more and more saturated. And as much as I liked it, I felt like a small fish in a massive pond. Whereas I thought if I moved to video, I could perhaps elevate my brand a bit further, quicker. So that was part of my thinking. So it was a creative endeavor for, I guess for the most part, because I just like the power of video has. Like we have with like sound and emotion, what that has over photo. It's just something I kind of wanted to explore a little bit. So that mindset was set in my head that I kind of wanted to make the shift. And then it was a chance meeting with Phil White. I don't know if you know Phil, but he is kind of like, I'd say grandfather. He's the same age as me. But the majority of wedding videographers now, like the new breed of wedding filmmakers, a lot of us have come through his kind of online course or his in-person course that he did. He did like a groundbreaking course. It's a few years ago now. It's probably like 6 years ago he did it. But I met him because I had a vision for how I want. If I was going to do videography, I had a vision of how I was going to do it. Because from photo point of view, I was always shooting on a 35mm lens and an 85. And the shots I was getting on my 85mm, I loved them. But they didn't really tell a story in the frame, because like they're nice, beautiful, tight shots, but didn't really tell a story. But I thought with video, because you're piecing together little frames, I thought if I shot a whole day on an 85 in video and pieced those scenes together, it'd look beautiful and tell a story in a really beautiful aesthetic way. And I was chatting to Phil, and he said he was a videographer. So I went through my usual process of quizzing a videographer that I've met. And so the things that were holding me back were kind of, I didn't want lots of equipment, and I was a bit concerned about how I'd do sound, because all the videographers I've worked with were using the lav mics with the wires, and it just seemed a lot of faff and stress. And so I asked Phil, I was like, so what kind of focal length are you using? And he was like, I use an 85mm all day. And straight away I was like, oh, light bulb has gone off here. Like, this is exactly what I was considering for my work. And then I asked him what you're using for sound. And he said, I just use these tiny little Sony dictaphones, which I don't know if it's the Sony TX650, which is some, like, all of us use these now. But at the time, Phil was the first person to use them. So nobody else knew about these. So again, I was like, this is the two things that I was kind of like thinking about. This guy is doing it. I really hope his work's good. And he left the room. So then I went and I searched him straight away to have a look at his work. And then it ended up being, it was the most beautiful wedding videography I've ever seen in my life. It was just, I'd never seen anything like this. And it was exactly how I envisioned I wanted my work to look. And he was doing it with minimum gear, minimum fuss. It was just ticking all those boxes. So straight away, I learned that he was doing courses. I was like, mate, I've got to come on your course. And so I went on his course, and like, he set the foundations really for then how I moved on and transitioned over.
Let's just explore that a bit more then, Roo. So, so first of all, I'm fascinated by the choice of the lens. So you're sort of, I guess, being much more immersive with a short telephoto. Is that the thinking? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's developed since then. So now I started off on that 85mm. Literally, that was my vision initially, and then just copying Phil's course, the 85mm. I soon found that was too tight. Because the other problem I had, Phil was always using like a monopod, and like anyone that was shooting an 85 was using a monopod because that's the only way to keep them stable. I soon realised, being a photographer initially, and then suddenly going to having a stick attached to you all day, I couldn't get the same compositions I was used to. I just couldn't move as freely. So I needed to ditch that as soon as possible. And then so my compromise was to go to a 50mm, which kind of gave that still a nice compression, nice tight frames. But it also meant I could keep it stable, handheld. So that was a shift I made. But the big difference between shooting photo and video is with photo, you need to tell a story. Quite often you need to tell a story in a single frame, don't you? With video, it's the opposite. You need multiple frames because you need to, for video, you want multiple cuts and move around in space and time to keep the edit kind of engaging. Single long takes of a frame are just super boring and dull to watch. So the way around that is if you shoot lots of tighter shots, it means you can cut between different frames and different angles, and it keeps it more engaging. So by using a tighter lens, it kind of lends itself to that. So yeah, and also you need to shoot around a photographer. So if you're shooting on a 35mm, they're going to be in frame like all the time.
Pesky photographers, yeah.
I can't remember it. So you must have been all right to work with, Nick. I remember the bad ones.
I'm normally rocking a 7200, so I was probably behind you.
Yeah,
I was probably
in the car park. Yeah.
I worked with I don't know if you know a guy called Lewis Arnold from I Do Wedding Films. It's on the south coast, but I suspect is either gone through the same course or has got a similar way of thinking, in that he would use a 70. I've never seen anyone use 7200 for a wedding filmmaker on a monopod. That's the only lens he used all day. Wow. 7200. Wow. Yeah. Really tight shots, really narrow depth of field, very fast. Because I looked at the edits afterwards because I was interested to see how they've been put together. And yeah, just a completely different film to one I've ever seen before. And when I do films, I don't do them like that, but it's totally different to mine. And it's just really, it is really, normally you go wide to get that kind of sense and get close to, but when it's, so that feels like that's immersive, but it's also immersive to get far back and get really, really tight in, because you just do feel like it's not, sort of, it's just very observational, it's kind of, very intimate feeling. When you, because I do remember when we shot together, you didn't have tons of kit. And I know exactly, because I started in wedding photography probably about the time that you made that leap. Because when I was first starting, the videographers were often still with shoulder mount, the last kind of shoulder mount thing,
shoulder mounts,
loads of stuff, really massive tripods and loads of boom mics all over the place, and that would have put me off completely. So. That's interesting. Where did you study, Roo, when you did filmmaking at university?
Manchester Met.
Okay.
I was there, and my plan was to be a film director. That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
Honestly, if I'd been told at that point in my life that I was going to end up being a wedding videographer, I would have been devastated.
Well, plenty of people do that, don't they, as a means to an end, and then they do their own kind of non-fiction, or fiction stuff on the side. But
it wasn't cool back then, though, was it at all? But honestly, I think I've got the best career in the world. Like,
absolutely,
what the job I get to do is phenomenal. But yeah, and the landscape of it is all changed. But going back to what you were saying about kind of like with a focal lens, then. Because with video, because you've got like being close with a wide lens, you can't really do it with video, can you? With photo, you can get in and you get a shot, and you can get out again. With video, you've got to be sit there for at least 6 seconds. And if you're with a 35mm tight, like, because that's how I used to shoot photo. I soon found out that my style of photography would not work for video. So
it's completely alien to me, because my preferred way of working is getting really in close. I'm often with 24 even, because I love to be close into the couple, but also get the the layers and the background as well. And I was listening to conversations where that clearly wouldn't work from your approach from
creepy
video.
for videography, yeah.
So is what you describing, and this is a word that gets used an awful lot, but I'm not sure everybody really knows what it means. Is what you're describing a cinematic approach?
Don't know. I don't know if it's cinematic. That is a word that we all use, isn't it?
Exactly.
I guess. Yeah. I guess you could break cinematic down in the way that it kind of shallow depth of field lends itself to cinematic. Doesn't it? Well, iPhone, for example, their cinematic mode is literally just shallow depth of field, isn't it? It's fake shallow depth of field. Yeah. So in that respect, yeah, I guess so. And I am kind of I like to, even though I'm handheld, I like my films to feel relatively still rather than chaotic and moving around. So I guess that kind of, I guess people's definitions of cinematic can vary.
I think it means a variety of things, doesn't it? It's definitely, it seems to be shallow depth of field, a certain sort of grade, I would say. If it is very real colours, just completely out of the camera colours, I think you would struggle to call it cinematic. The sequencing, the cutting, the story, I don't know, it is a mix of everything. And probably like you say, Roo, you can almost apply it to whatever we do, because we all do say the same thing. But I having looked at some of your films today, I said, if there is a definition of cinematic, then I think your films do have that in spades, and I think it really comes through. Do you find that?
Go on, Nick. After you.
Sorry, Steve. When you, because I just wanted, before you went on from Roo's sort of education, so you always had filmmaking in your wheelhouse, as it were. That was something that you wanted to do. When you decided to make that change, was it a very strategic, right, this year I'm going to start promoting myself as a filmmaker, or was it that couples who you were shooting photos for started asking about wedding films as well, and that was something that you moved into? How did that transition work? Yeah,
so it was, I guess it's probably worth me telling the steps I took to kind of make a little bit move into it. So I was in a wonderful space in terms of I had lots of photography friends that I'd met. So when it came to wanting to start to do videography, I had these friends that I could ask. I was like, do any of your couples want a wedding film for free? I'll come along. I won't be in your way. I can even help you as a second shoot for photo if you need, but I'll basically give them a wedding film for free. And I get to, some portfolio stuff for me. So I did that for a few weddings. A friend, Darren Gare, let me come along to a couple of his weddings. And I just, because I wanted to test it out first to see if I actually did like it. Because the problem, if you're going to change, if you're going to transition, I was doing quite well on my photo side. I was earning, I was charging a decent amount of money. Mm-hmm. So then to suddenly become a videographer, it meant starting again completely. Yeah. Which is, you can't just do that, can you? You just can't suddenly start going back really to the beginning.
And that's one of the jobs I've got this winter is I have to redo the website. I've had this other Squarespace site design that I need to transition to. I'm just terrified of doing it because I don't want to have to lose all my SEO and start everything again. So I can imagine starting a whole new stream of products to be pretty stressful like that, especially when your livelihood does depend on it. So you were able to get some content and get some portfolio pieces together.
Yeah, and it was a case of then I was considering. Basically, I had it in my mind right from the start that I wanted to fully transition over to video. That was in my head, and that was kind of like the end goal, because I was just all the things that I liked photography, but I didn't love it, and there was all the parts of a wedding day that I didn't love were eradicated with video. So it was all the things I did like the creativity and kind of the compositions and working with light and creating a story. But I didn't like the fact that as a photographer I felt like 90% wedding planner, and I was having just coordinating timings of the day. You know what it's like.
Completely.
I felt like my creativity was being stunted by the fact I was always worrying about when am I going to do group shots and coordinating times and working with people. As a videographer, that is completely gone. That is no. I used to, as a photographer, I'd drive to a venue, and the whole time I'd be preoccupied with where am I going to do portraits, where am I going to do group shots, thinking that over and over and over. For video, I'm just chilling. Like as I drive to that wedding day, I'm like, whatever happens, it doesn't matter, because I can work with anything. And when you're working with sound as well as visuals, you can build a story with whatever's there. if the weather's horrendous on a day, that can become part of the story. That can become an intriguing part. Whereas photo, if the weather's terrible, it's brutal, isn't it? So it almost, lots of my brain space was emptied with worry, and it left, and more creativity could come spilling in. So I ended up just loving the days. I absolutely love a wedding day now. It's the edit now that's the brutal bit, where it used to be the opposite before.
But that's quite, I think, with because I do a few wedding films. I've shot I shoot a few. My client, I do provide quite a few more where other people shoot for me, so I do the editing side. What I do love about that process is, you mentioned it earlier, Roo, that emotion, the emotional story coming to life in front of you. And it's interesting that would you say you're shooting for that story at the time? You mentioned story, this storyline a few times. Is that something you're kind of deciding on shot by shot, or is it something that just emerges once you look at the footage you've got?
A bit of both. So basically, I always tell my couples this, I want to immerse myself in their day and learn who they are as people from what's been said. And kind of, there's certain things I'm always going to capture on the wedding day. They just like default in your brain. Like you just kind of, you capture the groom, most likely I'm going to put by a window to put on his, his tie thing. That just happens. But then it's kind of, then I'm looking for what makes the couple unique and what's going to make an interesting part of the story. And years down the line, what will their kids want to see about their mum and dad? That kind of thing. Those kind of are going to my head, but I'm not really going in there with a preconceived idea. It's a case I want to experience that day and then create a film that really showcases that day. And
which keeps things nice and fresh, I suppose, as well. So you're never risking going into that rut of, this shot's going to work, that sequence is going to work, because it works for every couple, and they don't see each other's films, so they'll never know you're doing the same thing for each film. So I think that is
probably a good time to point out to the listener that Roo's got a fantastic YouTube channel, Roo Films, and I think you've got a couple or even 3 behind the scenes videos on there where you've got a videographer following you around videoing a wedding. And
Inception.
And what you just described really comes across so well, really, in those videos. The fact that you're not trying to control the day, you're just taking key moments from the day, I guess like we try and do as photographers. But you're quite right about all the must-take stuff we have to do as well. I think there's a bit where you're saying, what time are you going to get in the dress? So, okay, I'll make sure I'm there for that kind of time. But at no time are you sort of saying, I've got to do this shot, or you've got to come out here. You're just capturing what's going on in a beautiful way, really. And it's fascinating to watch. I've loved watching your behind-the-scenes videos. I really recommend them to anybody listening to the pod who's even remotely curious about making wedding videos. It's fantastic.
Thank you. I mean, it's interesting doing the behind the scenes, because I learned a lot about myself that I didn't know.
I bet you did.
And I didn't realize that, even I'm saying that, I like that I don't control the day as much as a videographer. I did notice that I do control it a lot more than I realized, but almost subconsciously, by making sure certain things happen at a certain time, or just planting the idea in people's minds throughout the day. I feel like I'm doing Jedi mind tricks on people throughout, and almost planting, because I'm knowing where we all know there's those bottlenecks throughout the day, don't we? Where, and the big one for video is kind of bride's dress going on, dad reveal. At that exact same time, I really need to be setting up for the ceremony and getting my multiple camera, my tripods up and that kind of thing. So I'm always doing things throughout the day to mitigate that kind of collision, helping the day speed along.
You're always getting these broad-sided things that happen there, don't they? Like that suddenly they'll say, "Oh, we're going to do a room reveal for the couple." It's like, right, that's just when I need time to do. I need to be either setting up cameras or doing some couple sequences and stuff. But I think that approach of just, you go into the day and you end up with where I've got to with the photography is, yes, you have to get those group shots and stuff, but that almost happens on autopilot, and you kind of just get that, which means you do. I know photographers when they often, some photographers always like this, but most of us when we start out are just panicking all day long about what's going to happen at what time. Are we missing that shot? Once you kind of just get used to sort of doing that with a chunk of your brain that you can just compartmentalize and let it do it, then you can focus on stuff.
Well, that's experience, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But going into a day, I did a wedding with a videographer that was working with me a few weeks ago, and we went, this is exactly what you're saying, Roo, about you can't have a fixed plan. Got to the venue where she was getting ready, and she said, I'm just about to be on the radio, and she was on local Radio Wales. Wow. As the bride of the day. And so we just chucked a TX650 down by the radio. It's like the perfect intro to the film. her on the radio. It's brilliant. You could never have planned it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm all about that. I'm all about like letting the day unfold before my eyes and then trying to find a creative way of telling that story of how that occurred. And that's been liberating, because even when I first started out as doing my videos, I felt like I haven't got enough bridal prep. I haven't got much of this. I haven't got much of that. But for photo, I feel that's still a thing. Like they expect certain things to be captured.
Yeah, they do.
For photo, and there's a lot more accountability. With video, you can miss entire chunks of that day out and not show it, right. Because and I do sometimes if it's not relevant to the story, doesn't help drive the story along or put the right emotions in place, and I'll just miss big chunks out. But with photo, you're like, no, you can't just delete random sections of the day just because they don't look pretty.
Where's all the bridal prep photos? Yeah, I didn't want to do those today. Yeah.
Well, I think especially if you get a couple, like some couples don't like loads of photos of themselves, do they?
That's true.
And if you haven't got, so they're the ones that you think, okay, we'll do a bit later. And then you think, oh, wow, it's like getting towards the end of the day. I haven't got any couple shots yet. I'm going to have to do so. And that's the only time I start to think, oh, I really need to get some couple shots. It's raining. We're going to have to go outside, whatever, because they're going to expect it. Although I have noticed that whenever there's any feedback about the set of photos I deliver, it's always, we love all the photos of us. There's really more of our friends. So that's the ones they want to see, really. They want a few kind of bangers of themselves, but it's their friends. And that's where video, I think, is just a really great way just to pick and choose little bits of moments through the day where you can showcase the guests. Did you find, Roo, when you went from, presumably there was a time when you were still doing photos some weeks and film others. Did you ever do hybrid shooting where you were delivering both at the same time?
Well, yes and no. So the way I'd do that is that was my plan. I did consider, and I did do a couple. I did a couple of hybrid, but without the couple knowing. So they'd booked me for photo, and I started to try and add in a bit of video at the same time to see if I could do it. And the truth with hybrid is it's impossible to do a really good job of both. You end up kind of doing possibly a mediocre job of both.
That's
like that, and that's what I was finding. When I'm doing something, I really need my full focus on that one thing. And the disciplines of video and photo, I know there's lots of similarities. They were I found for me, they're a completely different part of my brain I'm using. And it was hard. I was basically compromising on both by trying to do both together.
Yeah.
So the way around that was to then I'd hire in a videographer to work with me.
Okay.
And I got one at the weekend, actually. It was still a combo, called it my combo package. I'm shooting the photo. I've got a videographer shooting video for me. And it's great being in control of both teams because I can make sure, I know what to prioritize for certain bits. Like, for example, for speeches, I won't be going mad. I won't be getting in my own cameras. I'll be catching a few kind of reactions for photo, but then letting the video speak for that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But even then with those combo packages, like I've pretty much, my photography business is pretty much gone now. The jobs I am getting through are very few and far between. And I don't market it at all because I knew that video was where my kind of heart was, I guess. It's really where I wanted to focus my energies. But that was a difficult thing, was trying to transition my business over, because with photo, I was booking up like 2 years in advance and I wanted to bring in a whole new business. So I ended up for a couple of years almost doing double because I was trying to bring, I was saying no, I'd already booked up for photo for the year. I had like my 30 photo bookings. Then I just started adding in the video as well. And I was thinking, it's going to take me like 2-3 years to get to a point where I can transition over. But then COVID happened and it really accelerated it all, because then there was all these cancellations. And when I rebooked, I didn't rebook the photo, I rebooked the video.
Do you find the video is still booked a little bit further down the line from photography with most wedding couples?
I don't think it is anymore.
No, it used to be. I feel the same. Normally they're asking at the time of inquiry, if they want both, they're asking about both.
I think now that has changed. I think COVID did that because there was incredible wedding filmmakers out there in the UK, but a lot of people weren't booking it. The percentage of bookings, percentage of weddings that had videographers was quite low compared to photo, I'd say. But with COVID, when we had these small numbers, people were then hiring videographers to be able to show the film of the day to the friends that couldn't.
That's right, yeah.
And it got the kind of awareness of what filmmaking is like now, and we just skyrocketed. And I was quite lucky I've got my foot in the door just before that to kind of. So my trajectory in terms of my career for video was if it was on a graph, would be completely different to what my photo was. My photo was like slow and steady. With video, which kind of because I won TWEA the national award this year, at the start of this year, January.
No,
and that would have been completely unachievable for me in photo. I know it would have been like completely unachievable, but I did that to do that within 6 years of video. I was stunned, absolutely stunned, to be fair. But
well deserved, to be fair. So
absolutely.
Thank you, thank you so much.
What is your plan, Roo? So you talk about your trajectory. Are you planning to grow the business in terms of headcount? What's your ideal?
Yeah, so at the start of this year, I started Coda, which is it started off as a conference for wedding filmmakers. We had our first conference in October, and my plan was always to move into the education space. And my behind the scenes on YouTube was the start of that. And then I put together Coda to create this conference for wedding filmmakers to get together for the day, and we sold out within 72 hours of that. And then we had the first event in October. And it went so well. It was really, really well received. And I put the tickets on sale for next year's one at the event, and we sold out within 43 minutes for next year. So that's a lot of my energy is going into Coda at the minute, and I've got some plans to kind of expand on that kind of educational supplement to my business, I guess. Also, my wife has joined. She joined a couple of years ago to Roo Films as editing, and she's taking her kind of responsibilities in terms of editing are increasing. So the plan is to she'll take on a bulk of the editing. I've trained her up, and then so I'll be then dancing between the education side and also the filming. I'll be doing all the filming still.
Yeah,
but then the hard work. It's going to be my wife, Jade.
There's a podcast with that now as well. I think you're doing a podcast on the.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so there's it's kind of bi-weekly podcast where I interview other wedding filmmakers and basically quiz them, because we're videographers. We're all quite nerdy and gear driven, and the podcast is very much very technical, and very squeezing as much knowledge out of these incredible filmmakers as possible, really.
Well, we're a bit nerdy and geary on this as well, so let's just do a bit of that stuff. So you're a Sony shooter as well, I think, like Nick and I?
Yeah, A7S3. I call it my Boris camera because I keep bringing up COVID, don't I? But
she's obsessed with
the town I'm from, the Nuneaton, they did this thing where if your business had been affected by COVID, where you couldn't work, but if you could come up with a plan to diversify, you could put a loan in to get put an application to get a grant for some gear. And I diversified into live streaming funerals, and I put a grant for some gear, and it included an A7S3. And
good plan.
So they paid for my A7S3, which I'm still rocking now. Like, it's an incredible camera for video.
I did a couple of those, but I just used that little Mimo thing. It was Mevo, whatever it was. It was like a GoPro.
That's what I was using. Yeah.
God, it was a stressful way of making 300 or 400 quid. Because it was just cash flow at the time. But
I soon sold all that stuff off.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I think I'm right in saying, from what you want to reveal behind the scenes, though. So I know what puts a lot of photographers off video, particularly with Sony, is all the picture profiles and S-Log3 and all this stuff. But I think I'm right in saying you just shoot in a standard profile. Is that right? I've
changed that now. I do shoot in log now, but if you are moving over to video, ignore log. Don't even look at log. For people that don't know, it's our version of RAW. It's not quite as flexible as RAW, but you have a bit of recovery in it. But also, when you're shooting RAW, you have to shoot at certain ISOs to not introduce noise, and it can get a bit complicated. But I always say to people, when you're first starting out, don't worry about that. I've shot in the standard profile up until March this year.
Wow.
So I won that national award on work where I hadn't, I hadn't used log at all.
Amazing.
I think with video, you're a bit more patient and you're taking your time. You're not having to run around and snap in. You get time to get your exposure right and things like that. So shooting standard is absolutely fine. There's enough it's got the same amount of flexibility as a JPEG, but if you're getting it right in camera, which most of us are these days with EVFs, right? With cameras. Yeah. So it's not a problem.
Yeah,
so amazing. Are you using what are you using to grade? Are you manually grading that, or using a LUT sort of plug-in system or
Yeah. So, for the log or for the standard
for log
profile? For log, I'm using a Gamut.io website. They've got a base LUT for Sony, which that gets thrown on all my clips. So that turns it to Rec 709. So basically makes it look like, because when you look at log footage, it's just all grey and washed out. But put that base LUT on, and that sets it to makes it look like how it would have done in shot on a standard profile. And then I just put my LUT over the top of that as well. So I'm using
just
Film
get the website for that again, so I can link into that. Gamma.io, was it?
Gamut.io, I think it is.
Sorry,
Gamut.io, yeah. And they do a load of LUTs and conversion.
Have you ever come across Film Convert, like film nitrate?
Yeah,
that's what I'm using as well.
Yeah, I love it.
So my LUT is film nitrate. Yeah. So I'm using that, but I'm not using it in the proper way, because basically, if I was using film nitrate the proper way, I'd just set because you choose what profile you're shooting on it, don't you? And then it's got a load of film emulations for the right camera.
Yeah.
So I put my base LUT on to turn it to Rec 709, and then I put Film Convert over the top, and I'm just using that as a main LUT over the top. I'm not even using it set to log. But I feel like it's a real trend in wedding filmmaking for like grey and washed out films. I wanted to bring a lot of my colour from my photos into my film. That's why mine are quite vibrant. So
absolutely.
So I'm doing like a double layer of grade where most filmmakers probably wouldn't. Which is.
And what are you editing in? Are you what software?
Final Cut Pro I use.
Okay.
Yeah, but if I was starting out now, I'd probably go with DaVinci Resolve because it's free and it's amazing.
Yeah, that's what I use. Yeah.
Seems to be a pretty common. Yeah, I think a lot of people are saying the same thing, that just seems to be like the best of both worlds. I use a bit of both, but I think both Premiere and Final Cut have got their but Final Cut just looks fantastic and it's just really slick.
Yeah.
Premiere is more fully featured in the sort of colouring areas, but it just looks terrible. It looks like a sixth form has written it.
Yeah, and it crashes all the time. And with wedding filmmaking isn't that complicated in the edit. It really isn't. It's for the most part straight cuts. And if it isn't straight cuts, it ends up looking cheesy and weird. And you just don't need to overcomplicate it. And if you're using a Mac, Final Cut on Mac, they're just intertwined, aren't they? So it's just a beautiful piece of software. Because all my uni days and everything, I was always Premiere. And then in one of my graphic design jobs, because I was a graphic design just before I moved into photography, they had Final Cut, which I used, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is beautiful!" So it feels like just a slight step up from my movie, Final Cut. It's so intuitive and beautiful, and it works so well.
Yeah, no, absolutely so. And I think Nick's asked the question about what you see, happening in the future. But where would you want to be with your business, say, in 10 years' time? Where would you see the business going then? What would you be doing? If we interviewed you in 10 years' time, it wouldn't be until I'd retired, but what would you be doing?
So I'd be 50, 51, nearly 52 by then. So, because I love shooting the weddings. I absolutely love it. So I'd love to still be involved, but realistically, can I be? I don't know. So I'd like to still be involved in the industry. And I feel with Coda, it's creating a brilliant community for wedding filmmakers, because for photographers, there's lots of communities out there. There's like 9 Darts, you got Snap, you got Photographer Farm. There's all these different things. For wedding filmmakers, there was nothing. So with Coda, that was like the first steps. And this year, even for next year, we're seeing a lot of other conferences that are popping up. So that wedding filmmaking community is growing, and I'd still like to be part of that. And so perhaps kind of in the education sphere, I am looking at expanding the business out further than myself. So having people shoot for me, and then having an editing hub, that is definitely something I'd look into. I've considered like a volume brand. So I work so my prices at the minute are kind of 3,000, 3,500, and which I feel is kind of like the middle market area. But there's a lot of work to be had kind of around the kind of 1,500 to 2,000, which I could have teams shooting for me in that, I imagine. And it's basically kind of I did some. I have one of my friend Daniel Yates. He's a wedding editor, and I've had him. I know Daniel, he's a fantastic videographer, and now he does quite a lot of editing. I've outsourced work to him, and that was so liberating, because the edit is like, that's the key thing for video. But with it, the way my edits are structured, I do like a longer film, which is like a 10 to 15 minute film. They get the speeches and the ceremony in full. And then I give them a shorter, like 3 to 5 minute film. I would say that 3 to 5 minute film is my masterpiece, because that's where I get to be creative. I don't have to. There's no accountability. I can put whatever I want in that, because because I'm delivering the longer film with pretty much everything in, it means I can be creative with a shorter film. But then outsourcing those longer films means like by the time I come to do my masterpiece, I'm not physically drained by the wedding from doing this longer film. So it almost I thought outsourcing I was losing control. By outsourcing, I actually felt like I gained more control and more love for the edit. Yeah. So going through that process has really opened my mind to I should probably look at expanding the business beyond myself. So that's the kind of avenues I'm looking into. Like I'm at that point in my life where I'm a sole trader with no pension, and I'm 41. I'm thinking I need to start earning more money.
Believe me, when you get to 61, mate, you're very focused on your pension. Believe me.
Yeah.
And one final question from me, Nick, and I'll shut up. What's your view on the rise of the content creator? And have you yet to work with one?
I've not worked with one, but I did interview Mal from MB Wedding Events on my podcast, and she has had a stratospheric rise as a content creator. They've risen because there's a need and there's a requirement for them. That's why it's not like this random thing like a chocolate fountain that's just a trend for a year. Basically, and I've seen the change, and you guys would have as well, in the brides I'm shooting now. When I started out as a photographer, I was a documentary photographer, and I was a documentary photographer because couples didn't like having their picture taken, but they wanted nice pictures without feeling like they were having their picture taken. Whereas the brides I'm shooting now very much do like having their picture taken and know how they want to have their picture taken. And they almost want to be in control of that away. So the photographers I'm working with as a videographer now are like, everything is posed. It's almost like we're stepping back in time in terms of how it is. It's very like we're going back to the film, like the photo on film days. It's it's a complete transition. And content and they also like putting their own video clips out themselves as well. So what content creators are giving them is it's content that they can create their own little films themselves and drip, rather than have like one film, that 3-minute film that they're probably no one's going to watch because no one's got the attention span. They can drip feed on their socials little bits of the day. So I think the kind of market I'm in at the minute, I don't think they'll affect it too much, because if they're investing the amount of money they are in what I'm doing, they want a longer film. They want something put together in inverted like cinematic. That's what I am. But I think the kind of lower level, like the kind of won't we get a videographer? I think they're going to get battered. I think, so. The fact that they'll get all these great video clips given to them the next day, which they can do whatever they want with them. And most brides now know how to put get CapCut out and put together a little video and things like that. So it's they prefer to have it that way, and they're cheaper. Like what about £500 content creators?
Like that, yeah.
But what I think, so even if, say for example, social media, people just suddenly start hating it, and they don't want things for their social media, and they want more, better thing. I think we're gonna have to compete with the content creators in terms of delivery times. And I think the only way, I couldn't deliver my films the next day. It's just impossible with what I have to do in terms of syncing audio and stuff. But what I could do is, during the break of the wedding day, I could start culling my B-roll and selecting my favorites. And I could definitely by the next day put together an Instagram reel to music of some nice clips of the day. And I think that's the kind of stuff as wedding filmmakers we're going to have to start doing to compete. And whether content creators stay or not, that kind of expectation of quick turnaround will be expected from all of us. Because when I started doing photo, the idea of delivering photo previews the next day was unheard of, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you don't, you're going to struggle, right? Pretty much everyone has to deliver that. It's almost an expectation that you're going to get some photos the next day. And I think that same transition is now happening to videographers.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I think that is interesting. I think the, as you say, Roo, I think what people need to be aware is that a content creator isn't creating the same stuff. It is a different thing. It's not a curated film. So they are different, and there's no threat to videographers on that front. However, couples can still decide if they want one or the other. And at that lower end, I think where the price is more similar, or they can save half the money and go for a content creator, especially with the greatest respect. Those lower end videographers are going to be creating stuff that isn't work like you've got, and it's not the sort of nicely curated, thought about cinematic stuff. It is more similar to just having some content on iPhone. So I think it's been interesting. That's very interesting about whether it will completely change change everything again, and whether people will start going. I don't know how we can turn around films quickly while still creating that curated nature without, because I did work with somebody who used to do that, and he would go for those same shots often, all the same shots, and then during the wedding meal they're sticking it together in Final Cut Pro. By the end of the meal, it's pretty much, apart from some few clips of dancing, pretty much done.
Wow.
But to do that, you have to be very surgically formulaic to get in the shots you want.
There's no artistry in that at all, is there? No. It would I wouldn't be in this job if it was that kind of like approach.
Well, you're a million miles away from that, Roo, with the work you do. Yeah. It's been great having you on. Now, we just do a little bit of stuff towards the end of the pod, so please hang around and chip in as you see fit. But it's been fascinating finding out more about the world of what you do, and
thank you,
and the background to it. So thank you so much for coming on. But please hang around for the remainder of the show. So, Nick, you've been thinking a little bit on the technical side of things about low light photography, I think, today.
Yeah, it was just it was an area that, because I through the sort of workshops that I do and sort of looking at Facebook groups, it is an area. There's two things that seem to come up frequently, but there's loads of things that come up frequently, like RAW versus JPEG and all the rest of it. What seems to confuse people is low light, shooting in low light, and focusing properly. Not in low light, but just focusing properly. So don't need to cover both of those. Certainly with focusing, and I see this with a lot of established photographers as well. This idea of you need to take your landscape knowledge of landscape photography using hyperfocal distance. You can't get your charts out and start calculating things, but you still need to be, if you're shooting a group of people, you don't want to be focusing on the far person or the front one. You need to be going somewhere between the two, to spread that focal plane to balance it. And there's loads of techniques of doing that, and it's probably too late in the evening to go through.
So is it people are just confused by what focus is, and because obviously you're training people who've got a variety of backgrounds of photography?
Yeah, well, there's exactly. So the people that are, say, studio photographers are often unaware that if people are not stood in a direct plane of focus from the camera, they need to be thinking about not focusing on that closest person or the furthest person, unless they're going to stack it. They need to be sort of focusing sort of somewhere between the two to make sure both are equally and acceptably sharp. People that are in the earlier stages of their photography journey are often just still using the automatic focus mode, sort of not selecting a thing. And this is the funny thing with the future revisions of cameras adding more and more AI to focusing, when in fact, most of us, I don't know about what Roo might use. Certainly, I've never used anything other than eye autofocus and a spot focus.
Well, that's a good question.
Any of the object tracking. So I can still be using my R3, my A7 R3, which I still have and still do use for some things. Because everything else is just stuff that I don't ever use, because I'm never gonna rely on a bit of AI deciding that bride's moving. I want to be tracking her, eye and face, or just be routinely refocusing.
What do you do then, Roo? Because a lot of videographers do manual focus. Are you autofocus, manual focus, a bit of both?
Yeah, I'm kind of like a hybrid. It's autofocus predominantly, but then I've got the thumbstick customized. So once I hold it in, it locks off as manual, because the worst thing is if you locked on autofocus and someone walks in your frame, which happens a lot with video, and you kind of want it sometimes, you don't want the focus to then flicker off. So, but purists, that videographers hate that. They want most of them do manual, but I'm a photographer that moved over, so a lot of my habits from photography came over with it.
And you shoot Sony as well, of course.
Exactly, yeah. And why would you not use that autofocus? Yeah. But my static cameras are always set to manual, like the ones that are on tripods.
No, sure, that makes sense. Yeah. I guess you only got to shoot a group photo once at f1.8 and then realise half the people aren't in focus, and you'll learn that lesson quite quickly from then on, won't you? Having done that when I first started.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly.
AI now, though, that can sort that out, can't it?
Well, that's right. Yeah, completely. Yeah. No,
that's not the attitude. Come on.
Fix it in post, mate.
Just take a handful of random shots and we'll sort it out later.
From an industry news point of view, not a lot of stuff I don't think I've seen particularly. I think all the new camera brands announcements are all pretty much out there. We talked about the new Sony and the Sony lens last time, really. So I'm not aware of anything particularly new from a gear perspective. What I have noticed, because I'm an active YouTube addict, hence me discovering Roo's brilliant channel. why are so many YouTubers, particularly the street photographers, moving away from Fujifilm? It seems like all of them have got this big announcement, I'm moving from Fujifilm, whereas like 3 or 4 years ago, Fujifilm was cool, everybody was out shooting Fuji, all the street photographers, all the hipster guys. They all seem to be moving away now, whether I'm perhaps imagining that, but
what are they moving to?
Well, Roman Fox is a guy I follow a lot. He's moving to Sony. A lot of them have gone over to Leica, which I guess is cool and hip as well. So I don't know. Have I imagined that, or have you seen that as well? Or?
I haven't. Although, I mean, as we've said before, when I've done street photography sort of tours and things, I have had people rock up with Leicas that have got no photography experience, but they've got this $8,000 piece of kit in their hands. So I can see that is something that I can imagine people that can afford it would want to go to. But is it just not like a fad? Because people go in trends, don't they? So it's popular to hate on Canon or whatever it might be, and it just moves around and it goes from brand to brand.
Any videographers
like dogs, though, weren't they? Like they're have you owned Fujis?
Well, I used to use Fuji. I started with Fuji. We were Fuji until 2020.
So once you've had a Sony autofocus, you can't be going to Fuji, can you?
No.
Like, I've bought and sold so many versions of that X100, and each time I get it, I have to get rid of it because that autofocus is just disgusting.
Yeah, it's a different beast. Yeah. I guess there aren't many videographers using Leica, are there? Probably.
Phil White does now, funny enough.
Does he?
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, he uses Leicas, yeah. But I think he's just doing it to be cool because the functionality is nowhere near as good as the Sony's, I don't think.
Yeah.
That's the thing, yeah.
Having looked at Leica stills cameras, it's quite, that they really have, it's almost like they have intentionally not looked at other brands, how they do it. So they've,
completely.
Like you can't set up back button focus, for example. You just can't set it up. There's no way to do that. And a lot of people tend to go straight to Leica, so they don't often know there's any different way of doing it. But yeah, it reminded me of using a Mac OS for the first time ever. You just can, or you're probably something even more sort of hampered, like Linux, something where you just don't know how to do anything. It's not intuitive at all. Yeah. So it felt like that. Anyway,
talking of Macs, are you guys on Mac Apple Silicon?
Yeah.
On my laptop, on my iMac here, it's Intel still.
This is an M2 I'm talking to you on now. Yeah.
So I've just bought a second-hand M1 Max, and it is blown my mind because every other Mac is the same as when I first got my first ever Mac. Like the difference in quality compared to my PC was mind blowing. But then everyone's been incremental from then. It just not much change. Having this, it just felt like miles ahead going from an Intel to the
it's
Apple
rapid,
Silicon.
really fast.
Phenomenal.
It's crazy that my day-to-day setup is still this iMac because my laptop's got to be twice the speed of it,
And the battery.
I have to use both, sadly, but yeah.
But it's a 3-year-old second-hand laptop and the battery barely twitches, and I've not heard the fan once. It's bizarre.
That's the beauty of them. They run so cool, and the newer ones, I'm on an M2 here, but the M3, M4 are even better, apparently.
Yeah.
So, yeah, super, super cool. I have to have a PC as well for my training business because sometimes I have to be in the world of Microsoft for some of my customers, sadly. So I have a PC as well, which overheats straight away. As soon as I put it on, it's like crawling with thermal throttling. But anyway, another beast. Roo, I'm going to make your day now, mate, because we do a book of the week when I can actually get myself sorted and find one. And I found one you got to love.
Right.
And it's called Every Week We Follow, and it's a story of Aston Villa last season.
Yes. Oh, my gosh.
Brilliant book. And it's by a guy called, if I just find his name, the page is closed, Pete Hickman, and I think he used a Fuji, actually. But it's not of the players and the action. It's behind the scenes. So it's basically match day, people, on the terraces, people selling burgers outside the ground, people at the airport going to Bosnia for the Mostar game. It's a cracking book. It was 25 quid. I watch a podcast with the guys from the Evening Mail, Clarity Blue podcast, and the guy was on there a few weeks ago.
Great podcast.
It is, yeah. And it was 25 quid, and the proceeds go towards Birmingham Children's Hospital. So it's a cracking book.
Yeah, great.
I don't think you have to be an Aston Villa supporter to like it, but it does help. But strongly recommend it. Every week we follow the story of Aston Villa. The season they actually were quite good.
I'm absolutely going to get that. Great memories.
Get on your Santa list, yeah?
Yeah.
Talking of Santa list, on our next episode, Steve, we're going to do a Christmas wish list, aren't we? We're going to do our what we would like Santa to bring us kit-wise.
Do I have to dress up as the Virgin Mary?
Well, you are anyway, underneath what we can see. We know that. But yes, yeah, ideally that, or just you can give us Santa if you want to. If it's less contentious.
Yeah, our 12 days of Christmas. So, yeah, we've got to work out what it's going to be, things that we want or things that we suggest, but we'll work on it. But this is going to be a Christmas special in 2 weeks' time.
I think we'll divide that. We'll talk about how to do it. I think we'll have lens stuff, lens category, cameras,
well, it sounds a bit complicated.
Computing kit. So I think there's various things. It's all very expensive. And I don't suppose we've got budget to buy these things, have we?
No, unless any sponsors listening want to donate a few of those things, which is highly unlikely. So, Roo, again, thanks ever so much for being with us. Brilliant to have you on the show. Really looking forward to seeing what develops for you in the next few years. Really looking forward to seeing where Coda goes, because that sounds like a fantastic initiative. Yeah, really, really great to have you on again, mate. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
And thank you also, dear listener, for being with us for another episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the show in your favourite podcast app so you'll get the show coming immediately into your inbox. And also do leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. It does help us in lots of mysterious ways. Nick and I will be back again in a couple of weeks' time. Until then, happy shooting out there.
Goodbye.